Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 3-0 Take, where we talk all things Major League Baseball. Here's Kyle Corwin and Nate Reyes. It all starts right now.
Oh, welcome back to the 3-0 Take, presented by SeatGeek. This is episode 510. I'll be your host, Kyle Corwin. I'm here with my co-host, Nate Reyes. Nate.
We are baby back ribs. We back. Freaking Peter. Thanks a lot.
Thanks Peter. Ruins, I swear, this guy ruins everything. We waited all off season. I'm going to go ahead and say all off season because we're pretty much at the point of pitchers and catchers.
We're there.
So essentially waited the whole off season to make this happen, and had to do it right after we recorded 509.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I've got something. I've made you folks wait, but I've got something up my sleeve for you that I think you're really going to like.
10 Eastern.
I got a little something that I think you guys are really going to like. I hope you enjoy it. Here's a signing announcement after you've recorded the episode. Sick. Thanks, Peter.
Unbelievable. So we're back.
We're back. Third episode of the week.
We got to as quick as we could. I was busy today. You are responsible and worked. We had responsibilities. Now we're here.
We're talking
like
ball.
That's commitment to run it back.
Third episode of the week. Glad to be here. Glad to be talking some ball. Peter Alonso.
Freaking Peter.
Pedro back with the Mets.
Name, by the way.
Isn't it like Gabriel or something?
Oh, boy, I need to know now. Freaking Peter.
Isn't it? I swear it's Gabriel. Isn't it Gabriel? Morgan. Peter Morgan Alonso.
Morgan. It's not that bad.
Back with the Mets. Was this a surprise?
I don't know. I don't understand. I don't understand where the contracts have fallen. Wasn't it like? Wasn't he offered like 150 during the season last year?
So he was offered. What was it? Why do I think it was one?
It was over 100.
158.
Yeah.
Summer of 2023, rejected a 7-year, $158 million contract extension, and then hired Boras as his agent that fall. And then agrees after a we'll just call it a bizarre offseason, a bizarre free agency for Peter. After that finally comes to a close, agrees to a 2-year, $54 million deal. Going to go ahead and chalk this up as an L. It's very clear, very evident that he wanted to be back with the Mets. So much so, like we talked about, like was reported, that he and Boras made an offer to the Mets, an exclusive a Mets only offer, a 3-year deal offer made to the Mets, which at that point you can just kiss all your leverage out. You can kiss it goodbye.
Yeah, I know.
It's out the
When
window.
you're doing that. This just reeks of desperation. Reeks. Wasn't there like a 3-year, $90 million deal on the table a couple months ago as well? Something like that. Like a 3-year.
Not from the Mets.
I thought it was from the Mets.
Are you thinking of the offer that he presented to the Mets? Because his whole thing, him and Boras,
all this stuff.
More so with Boras, his thing is that he wanted to set the AAV record for first baseman. And
of course, sure. Scott Boras does. Every freaking player he has.
That's what Boras does.
To set a record. Like
he will cost his clients reps, confidence, money, time. He'll cost him anything and everything to get the deal done that he wants and this is just another example. He came dangerously close to repeating what we saw last year with guys like Snell, Montgomery.
I mean, it was still wait. We still got to wait. Who knows? Who knows what impact this has? Now, I'll say it's a little bit different for hitters. Hitters, I think, have a better ability to stay ready during the offseason. You know what I mean? I think it's a little different. But we'll see. Like, this still could be weird. Maybe not. He probably didn't sell his place. You know what I mean? Like, he's still in New York.
No. It's very possible he would have retired had he not ended up back with the Mets. I think that's how much he loves the Mets.
He probably moved to an apartment closer to Citi Field.
And probably
he got closer.
And probably included that in his presentation to Cohen and company. He was like, hey, this is how much I love this team. I moved temporarily to express to you how much I appreciate this team. But on a more serious,
you remember those commercials where like Baker Mayfield was like living in the Browns stadium?
Yes, that's him.
Yeah. But less funny.
He moved,
not funny.
Yeah, it was more out of desperation.
He's
than
just
anything.
a desperate, awkward guy. Yeah.
It's very possible he moved into the suite that's now reserved for Soto's family and was like, "Hey, just keeping this warm for you all until things get rolling here."
Yeah.
No, but on a more serious note, do we think that what do we think the factor here is at play, or the primary factor? If you take money out of it, if you assign that element of it to Boras and say Boras was the one that was getting greedy here, and maybe Pete was more okay with something a little lower on the scale in order to come back to the Mets. Let's just take money out of it. For Alonso, do you think this was more about his personal legacy as a guy who's only known the Mets? Do you think this was him wanting to be a part of what is now on the table for the Mets and their future, having brought in Soto, having brought back Mania? The excitement continues to build around this team. I think the fans are responding accordingly in that regard. Like, what do we think? Again, money out of the equation here, just for the sake of this exercise. Maybe it was a primary factor, but what do we think was ultimately pulling Pete back to Queens?
I mean, in all seriousness, like I would want back too. Like you've been a part of the bad times. You've been one of the lone good things during the bad times. You've been embarrassed. You've done weird things. The organization has gone in weird directions. You've gone through, we can run down the list of the managerial changes, the fake hitting coaches, the players launching gloves
Donnie Barrels
over nets. Like,
raccoons.
You've been through so many different strange things, and you finally get to see, like, wow, you know what? We got over the hump. We had fun last year. We succeeded. We had a little run, and we feel like we kind of got most, if not all, the monkey off our back. Rolling in the offseason, and you bring in the best player in his generation and lock him down. I'd want back too. Like, I went through all that. I went through the mud with you guys. I would want to come back to. So I don't blame him. I think, unfortunately for him, and I'll say unfortunately for Scott Boras, I don't really care about Scott Boras, but like, unfortunately for Scott Boras, the Mets knew that. The Mets understood that. But now what this deal is, because there's an opt-out after one, correct?
Correct.
Now what this does is the Mets can say, hey, we could still have a shot. We can bring our guy back, see if this is a year, see if he becomes what he's, always been, and really just jumps over the hurdle and becomes like a league leader offensively. and locks down in the middle of the lineup with a Juan Soto and Frankie Lindor, and the Mets blow up, and maybe they have an NLCS appearance. Maybe they even get to the World Series. Who knows? But if not, let's go take a run at a guy who's younger and better. Because Vladdy will be available next year. This was a job well done by the Mets. Like, as far as calling someone's bluff, as far as calling a free agent's bluff, calling an agent's bluff, and just saying, hey, fine, go somewhere else. I dare ya. And meanwhile, Pete's just freaking knocking on the doors of Citi Field, trying to get someone's attention. Please, I'll take $12. I don't care. Actually, just kidding. He got paid pretty well. It was a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I got paid pretty handsomely. I mean, he's going to make $30 million this year. I don't know. Not to always bring it back to like the girlfriend illustration, but and you mentioned Vladdy, but it just, this whole situation just really reeks of like, hey, this is like, we'll hang out for the time being, but just understand that this isn't going to last long. Look, I really appreciate what we've done and like what we've had for this many years, but I'm going to be moving on soon. And I think what's waiting for me down the pipe is a lot better and maybe even a little younger.
Dude, this is like, this is 100% like boyfriend. You find out boyfriend has a crush on someone else and you're like, and then you kind of break up for a little couple months. You're like, no, please, like, give me another chance.
Give me another chance.
Take me back, I promise. And you're like, well, I still have that crush, but sure, come on back. I don't know. This is just, it's so strange to me. I feel like it was a good opportunity, and maybe he still has it next year, but a good opportunity to go get a fresh start somewhere and just kind of carve your own path, man. Like, job well done. Pat on the back. I think you get a lot of respect from the Mets organization and Mets fans if you were a part of it gives me like Don Mattingly vibes. You know what I mean? Like, you were there through the tough times. You finally got to the point where like you were able to witness where a good era started. You know? So I would like to see him long term, but shame on you for, turning down deals. 7 years, 160 is it's not that bad. Like, I understand you may think you're worth more, and I understand the transition into going and getting the best agent, but like, I think teams are really starting to call Scott Boras' bluff and just making him sit out.
Yeah, and I think I saw it in the replies or something recently, but somebody made a good point where they're like, it's easy if you're Boras to claim a victory with Soto. Like, a 5-year-old could have handled that situation and gotten a hefty payday, but these like names we talked about: Snell, Chapman, Alonso, Montgomery. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
Reputable names.
Soto gets his contract with or without Boras.
That's what I'm saying. So, like, I think you and I were both. I don't want to lump you into this. I know I felt
lump
this way.
Me in. I'm part of the lump.
I feel like we were both jumping the gun a little bit when that deal did go down with Soto. We're thinking, okay, maybe Boras has found his swagger a little bit after last offseason, but now that the dust has settled from that move, and we've had a chance to look back on it a little bit, we've gotten a little bit of distance from it, and then also seeing how the off seasons have gone for Alonso and Bregman. It's like, are we right back where we were last off season with Boras? Like, is he really actually genuinely losing his step? Because, like you said, and Steve Cohen is in the ultimate position to call a bluff. He's like, if if we want to slot Mark Vientos at first for a year just because we can, we're going to do it. We don't need Pete Alonso. Like, again, Pete, thank you for all you've given this franchise for the last however many years. But like, we're just not interested in playing these games anymore. And you heard him at the Amazing Day the other day. He was like, the negotiations have just been exhausting. And he got real transparent with the fans there, and respect to him. He was just like, it's just gone on too long. Like, it's been exhausting. It was tougher than the negotiations with Soto. So it's I
love transparency.
Yeah, right. And so it's like, if he's looking at this going, Pete, look, you're loved by fans here. You're loved by us in the front office here, by ownership. But it's just not going to work, man. Like, these negotiations just aren't going the way we would have hoped. Okay, you can call the bluff of Scott Boras, and like you said, wait out Vladdy. If you want to be in the mix for that, you're going to be presumably first in line, at least financially. And as you continue to add names like Soto, you bring, like I mentioned, you bring back Mania. And we talk about that. We've talked about this all off season. You make it a destination. You may not be in the most ideal place. Yeah. Like, I know New York certainly has its benefits, but some people may look at that and go, I'd rather go to a place like San Diego. Mm-hmm. If you have a player who maybe is interested in maybe a West Coast scenario, if you continue to build up your organization and insert yourself into the conversation of potential destinations, you're only helping yourself out that much more, knowing, specifically talking about the Mets, that you're going to be in the front of the line financially, in or near the front of the line financially.
Yeah.
So if they didn't want to make this work, we'll call it quote unquote plan B of Vladdy next year, that would have been equally fine, if not better.
Is it a club option, I'm assuming? Mutual?
Yes. Right?
I'm trying to find it. By the way, when I typed in Peter Alonso, because I was grumpy, Google was like, "You mean Pete?" I was like, "No, I meant Peter."
I meant Peter.
No one's just named Pete. Player option.
Player option. Yep. Another 24 mil in 2026. So, well, I mean, let's talk about that. Let's play out the scenarios here. He goes out, has I won't say a record-setting year, but a gold star caliber year, we'll call it.
Mm-hmm. Let's say MVP hunt year.
He receives MVP votes. Yes, we'll say that.
Okay.
Let me ask you this. Before we even get to the end of the season in these scenarios, do we think that there's any chance that if he starts off the year well, do we see any, and to be honest with you, I haven't seen much conversation about this thus far, but I feel like it's a question worth asking. Could we see any sort of contract reconstruction at any point this year before we get to that point and say, hey, you know what? I think both parties involved here were a little fatigued by the negotiations this offseason, but he's clearly a fit here. We'll find a way to make it work, even if we have to slot him in, if we have to, sort of use the DH as like a rotating wheel situation. Let's make this work. We'll keep you around for a few more years, give you a little bit of that security. We won't give you the full security that you're looking for in like a 6-7 year type deal, but we'll negate this whole opt-out situation. We'll give you a couple years and move forward. Do we think that a situation like that happens, or do you think that the Mets are just hoping that Vladdy comes knocking next year?
No. In a word, no. Because it's not just the Mets anymore. It's the Mets and Juan Soto. I think the relationship between Juan Soto and Vladdy is It weighs a lot more into this equation.
It's at play for sure.
So I think this tells us that there's absolutely no way, barring a Blue Jays extension of Vladdy, there's no way that the Mets won't be in on Vladdy.
Which they have, I think, 11 days. I think I saw it was the 17th that he gave the Blue Jays.
Yeah, there's just no way. And then, like you said, at that point, say Pete is still reeking of desperation, he probably picks up his player option, and then you rotate first base and DH a little bit for a year, and then send Peter on his way. I think that'd be the move. But in my mind, I don't see a world where the Mets aren't fully in on Vladdy next year.
Well, let's look at this year. And I wanted to ask you, how, having watched Soto as closely as you did this past year, how do you think that this could potentially impact Pete's offensive output this year, with just a different type of bat around him? A bat that sure, like him and Frankie have been up there at the top of the lineup for some number of years now, but I mean, you insert Soto into that lineup before or after Pete. I don't know what that lineup's going to look like on a day-to-day basis.
I would say
having Soto around, how do you think that's going to change Pete's output?
Safe to say it gets better. Safe to say it goes up. You know what I mean?
Right, which brings us back to the whole what happened? Like, what does this look like if Pete's pulling MVP votes at the end of the year because of
I think
the bump that he received?
The Mets do need to reconsider that conversation, but it's evident to me. We joked about it before. It's evident to me that Juan Soto is. We see it all over sports now. We see it in multiple examples that you have a superstar that is a part of decision making moving forward. We've seen it with Judge. We've seen it with LeBron James, right? We've seen it all over the place. We've seen it with Shohei. We've seen it all over the place where it is, I'm committing myself here. I want to be a part of where the ship goes from here. If you're giving him a suite and giving a shopping expense to his family, I can promise you that it's not going to matter. Unfortunately for Pete, I don't think it's going to matter. What Juan Soto he got MVP votes last year. And a lot of that is hey, you were connected with Judge. You had your best year ever, and Judge was a part of that. Don't care. I'm out. See ya. Juan's going to do Juan. And the Mets have clearly shown that they are going to be at his beck and call.
That's a valid point. And, the more I think about it, because honestly, I haven't thought about it until just now, but thinking about what those friendships, we can call it, relationships, friendship, I feel like is too far, because I think Soto and Pete are gonna, they're gonna play together because they play for the same team. But if we have any sort of clue as to the type of player Soto is and the type of vibes that he's looking for, I don't think Pete aligns with that really at all.
I agree. I'll be honest, I struggled to see with Judge. Have you seen that clip that has gone out of them?
That's a good point.
The audio of them being next to each other in BP during the All-Star game. Then it was kind of awkward. There wasn't a whole lot of chemistry going on between Judge and Soto. And I think Judge is a lot cooler of a human than Pete Alonso.
Yeah.
And Juan Soto is very cool. I just don't see that gelling at all compared to a Vladdy. Hello.
Yeah, I mean, I think to that point, I think Soto's gonna, he's gonna pay his respects to what Alonso's done for this organization, and he's gonna coexist, we'll say. Mm-hmm. But I think you're right. I think he's gonna be pulling all the stops for.
And shame on Scott Boras for not projecting that to your client in Pete Alonso. Your other client is very much holding on to the strings of this organization in Juan Soto. Like your other client, who you also represent,
dude,
is going to get what he wants, and what he wants is not you. So shame on Scott Boras for being like, we just want money. You know what I mean? Pete wants to be here, but let's make it happen.
But let's be honest, like it's easy to rag on Scott Boras. We don't know that he didn't relay that and try to make that clear to Alonso. It's very possible. I mean,
that's fair. He didn't care.
Like
that's the best friend just telling the girl, dude, it's time to move on.
Boras
He's got his eyes on someone else.
Somebody else.
No.
He may have lost a step, Boras, but I don't think he's an idiot. And I think even he can look at that and go, Pete, this isn't going to work. Like I know you want to be here long term. They know you want to be here long term. Yeah. The fans know you want to be here long term, but you're not going to be wanted here very soon, especially by the guy that you're taking the field with.
Yeah.
So it's very possible that maybe he did relay that, but Pete was just hell bent on coming back to this team, which I can respect. Like I can respect.
I've already backed. I would have come back too. I would have wanted back.
In an age where guys chase the money, and again, we don't know how much or how little of a priority that was to Peter specifically, not him and Boras, just Alonso. Yeah. Maybe it was a factor, but in an age when a lot of athletes, not just baseball, across sports, chase the money, he was like, this is where I want to be. And we can sit here and call him a cornball all we want, but got to respect that at least.
And also, like, look at the status of the Mets in summer of 2023 when that offer was on the table of 7 years, 150 change. Look at the status of where they were at. You know what I mean? Last year changed a lot. And Uncle Steve opened up his checkbook for Juan Soto. Finally, like, put his money where his mouth is. So, and then you see other guys coming back, right? You see Anaya being re-signed. Like, it makes you want to get the gang back together and then invite a new superstar in and say, let's run it back this year. So I don't blame him. But
speaking of superstar, we got an interesting question in the chat. Jay Farrell 305 says, when the Mets play the Yankees for the first time this year, who's got the bigger chip on their shoulder, Soto or Judge? It's a great question.
I'd probably say Judge.
I would also say Judge. Yeah.
Like, the Yankees were in that hunt. Like, they were right there as far as offers go. I don't think they were willing to do the suite. I don't think they were willing to do some of, like, the family stuff from what it sounded like, because they've never done that stuff before. And it's difficult for an organization that has done that and signed big free agents in the past. It's not as difficult for the Mets being like, well, we've never done this before. Let's might as well do it for him. So I think the Yankees were in it. I don't see, like, I don't know if Soto gets the payday. He probably gets something great, but I don't know if he gets this payday if it wasn't for the success he had with the Yankees last year.
Yeah, and if you're Judge, you probably got to be looking at this situation being like, I understand why Soto got the love that he did this offseason and the contract that he got this offseason, but, like, make no mistake, like you just said, make no mistake, I played a huge role in making that happen, because like, Juan Soto was going to be Juan Soto for the rest of his career. Like, that's a given. But to come off of the year, to hit free agency coming off the year that you just did, That's not a coincidence, Juan Soto. And I'm not trying to diminish anything he's done to this point. I'm not trying to discredit his future.
He's still capable of being a Hall of Famer. Like, it's going to happen.
He's going to end up in the Hall of Fame. But if you're Aaron Judge, you got to be looking at that going, this is still my team. And frankly, it was still my team when you were on the team. But I was willing to sort of, to use a word I used earlier, coexist. I was more than willing to make that happen. We pushed the chips in, made it to the World Series. But now you're across town, and I'm still here, and I feel like I still have a little something to prove, because there's a lot of people wondering, well, maybe I was feeding off of you a little bit, and maybe that's true. I think it's safe to say that was true. They were feeding off each other, but I think Judge wants to put the league on notice yet again and remind them, like, I can play ball too.
It was also a very rough ending to his season on the biggest scale.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Thoughts on what this does for the division, looking at the NL East, because you look at what the offseason was for the Mets prior to this deal, and I think you could have chalked it up as certainly a very successful offseason. But now that you get a guy back that's capable of putting 50 in the seats, regardless if he's going to be here the year after or beyond, you at least get him for this year. And if the cylinders are clicking, like you said, NLCS run, maybe even you find yourself in the World Series somehow. What is
crazier things?
What is prior to that, though? Short of that, how does this shake up the division, if at all? Because we talked about the Braves.
I'm committing to being out on the Phillies. I'm not going to back out on that.
Well, I'm giving them one.
I may look stupid at some point this year, and that's cool, but I said it. I got to die on it.
I respect it.
So remind me that when I'm feeling a certain way at a certain point about the Phillies. But I think the Braves are back. You know what I mean? I think they're back. They're healthy. The Nationals are better than I think a lot of people expect. I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to be in the hunt.
I'll say again, I would have loved to have seen them take a bigger step forward.
The Mets have a very real chance to take this division. I don't love their pitching. Still some question marks in the rotation.
You don't know what you're going to get from Clay Holmes.
Well, who knows what that's going to be? So, yeah, a lot of question marks there. But job well done in the offseason. A team that will likely be a buyer at the deadline and can plug holes wherever they see them. I still think the Braves are better. I think they're deeper. I think they have a deeper lineup. And I think they have a better staff. But I think it's gonna be close, man. I could honestly see the Phillies in finishing third. I think the Braves, like, I genuinely chalking last year up as a fluke, as a injury plagued fluke. So I don't know. It's different, man. It's weird because, like, you also have the conversation of, like, when the Mets have expectations on them, they normally poop down their leg. When they don't have expectations is when you saw what you saw last year. When everyone's out on them, that's what you saw.
Sure.
They got to bring back Jose Iglesias. That's the only way.
To your point about because I was curious, I was like, I need to refresh myself on the back end of that Braves rotation. You know, you can sit here and say, well, there's question marks with the Mets. Like, what are you going to get from a healthy Kodai Senga? Like, what are you going to get from Clay Holmes in a rotation? What's Frankie Montas going to look like? Yeah, I think you kind of know, assuming he sticks to what changes worked for him meaning Sean Manaea, and assuming you get similar output from him, I think you'll be all right there. But for as many question marks as you have with the Mets rotation, you could equally say the same thing for the Braves. Like, are you going to capture lightning in a bottle with Chris Sale last year? Absolutely. And if he can stay healthy, you're probably going to get more of the same. May not end up with a Cy Young, but if he can stay healthy, that's the biggest thing. Can he stay healthy? If he can, you pretty much know what you're going to get. Reynaldo Lopez. What does that encore look like to last year?
There's a stud.
Spencer Schwellenbach. Certainly a high ceiling there. Grant Holmes and Ian Anderson are projected to the back end of the rotation there.
Kind of out on Ian Anderson.
So it's like, I don't know. I mean, you can talk about the depth of the lineup, certainly.
But the weight of Spencer Strider, the Mets don't have a Spencer Strider. I'm sorry. I think a Kodai Senga is at best a 2 in a rotation. I don't think he's an ace.
Sure. Yeah.
I would probably slot him as a 3. You put him in any other rotation that's solid around the league, and he ain't leading it. So I think the Mets did great. I think Juan Soto is going to do a lot for that lineup. I don't know. You may see something crazy out of Ronnie Acuna's little brother. Maybe he steps in and starts getting some more starts and plays a little bit more. Maybe the Jeff McNeil ride needs to end at some point. Ugh. And
I've never seen somebody more out on Jeff McNeil.
Ugh. Most punchable face. Just, anyway, yeah, I like the Braves. I think a little bit more, but it's gonna be close. It's gonna be neck and neck, and there ain't no reason that the Mets can't repeat what they did last year. They got better.
Sure. Well, you may be out on the Phillies, but like I said, I think I'm going to give them one more year. So for me, at least, sounds like for you, it's more of a 2-team race. But for me, and we'll get into this as we get closer to the season, obviously, but for me, I still think it's going to be, as it has been for a little while now, any one of those 3 teams, I think could make a run at it. But it'll be interesting to see.
Last question before we head out.
Yeah.
Do you see whatever kind of season Pete Alonso has, do you ever see another $150 million contract offer on the table for him?
Well, let's see here. He is at the end of this season, he's still going to be 30. He turns 31 in December. So next year will be his age 31 season. Let's say he opts out, goes to free agency again. In order to get a $150 million deal, that would have to be minimum 7.
Yeah, 6 is pushing it.
Yeah, we'll just say 7. So you really want to sign up Pete Alonso into his 38?
6 isn't pushing it. 25 million a year is not crazy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess it just depends on what he gives you this year. But okay, we'll say 6. Do you want to be digging yourself into a hole where you have Pete Alonso into his age 37 season? Probably not. Because the other thing you have to keep in mind too is the first baseman market has seemingly just plummeted. Like there just seems to be less and less interest in overextending yourself financially for first baseman. Like they're still going to get paid for sure because you need to field a first baseman. But
yeah,
I think he missed his shot. But
yeah, I agree.
I guess this is the next best thing, even though it's still objectively an L. But
yeah.
Anyway, that'll about do it. Peter Alonso back to Queens. I'm just glad he's not coming to Boston. That was a sigh of relief. Although we may have to revisit this conversation next year. I sure hope not, because I'm hoping Boston will be in the Vladdy mix too. So as long as Peter Alonso never dons a a Red Sox uni, I'll be happy, man.
It does make the Vladdy conversation interesting next year if he does opt out. It's kind of like if we don't get Vladdy, we can still get Pete kind of thing. But like, I don't know. I don't know what the market told us this year. Maybe he ignored all other calls. Whatever. He's a Met. In the meantime, I'm going to bed. I'm tired.
Let's get to bed.
It's that time. Don't go chasing curveballs, man.
We love you on as always. Looking forward to talking more baseball with you guys soon. Until next time, stay filthy.